All right, y'all, let's jump into our first draft debate of the 2025 offseason for the Dallas Cowboys, as everyone is raving about Penn State linebacker slash defensive end Abdul Carter. It really just depends on what scheme he goes into. But Abdul Carter is 100% a beast. He's 100% a top 5 type of talent. I don't want anyone to get the message confused within this actual show. I believe that Abdul Carter is going to be a difference maker on the NFL level. I believe a guy like a Will Johnson is going to be a very good cornerback in the National Football League. I believe Mason Graham is going to be a very good defensive tackle in the National Football League. And I also believe that the Dallas Cowboys could use any of those guys. The argument I'm making today is they need to go on the other side of the ball, and history shows them they need to go on the other side of the ball. What's the biggest thing that you guys criticize the Jones family about? Doing the same thing and expecting a different result. That's literally the definition of insanity. The Dallas Cowboys have done the same thing with this team and expected a different result when it matters the most, which is the playoffs. That's where we start. So obviously we're kind of jumping into this discussion because Micah Parsons has made it known that he wants Abdul Carter to get drafted to the Cowboys at pick number 12. I don't think he's going to make it to pick number 12. And I'm going to say this: if he does drop to pick number 12, it is going to be very difficult to pass up on an Abdul Carter and trying to pair him with a Micah Parsons unless the number 1 receiver is still on the board, unless the number 1 running back is still on the board. And at that point, I would honestly encourage the Cowboys maybe trade back a couple of spots like you did the year you drafted Micah Parsons. Get some more draft capital since that's your primary means of building your team, and go back to 14th, 15th pick, still get one of the top running backs or receivers in the draft, and you also have more ammunition to load the coffers with. Abdul Carter at this point for the Cowboys, yes, he would make an absolute impact. He's essentially a carbon copy of what Micah Parsons was coming into the league. He's one of those slightly undersized defensive ends that has incredible bend, incredible speed off the line, and is an absolute game wrecker. Great motor. He's a game wrecker. I am not in no means saying that Abdul Carter is not a great player, a great prospect coming into the league. But what I'm saying is the Cowboys have a much more dire need, and that's on the other side of the ball. And at pick number 12, you're more than likely going to have a premium pick, one of the cream of the crop picks of either a top receiver or a top running back or one of the top 2 receivers in the draft for this season. And what the Cowboys haven't done traditionally is they haven't been able to consistently score points in the playoffs when it matters most. Because in the playoffs, when it matters most, when the Cowboys actually lose, they end up losing because they can't keep up with another team, because they don't have another weapon outside of whoever's designated as their number 1 receiver at the time. They don't have other guys who can beat individual matchups and make it easier on the quarterback. I understand having a stronger defense, having a more consistent defense can help your quarterback. You know what else can help your quarterback? Giving him weapons, giving him guys who aren't totally dependent on the quarterback elevating them, giving him guys who aren't totally dependent upon being schemed open. Giving him guys who can beat individual matchups, who can create something out of nothing, giving him guys that can generate explosive plays on their own behalf. Now, I realize, traditionally speaking, the Cowboys' biggest issue has been defense and being able to stop the run. But if we actually take a closer look at things, you can actually see that since Micah Parsons has been here, since the defense has had kind of like a reinvention of itself, since Trevon Diggs, Micah Parsons, some of these other pieces have implanted themselves on this team actually doesn't give up a lot of points in the playoffs. Their biggest issue is they haven't been able to actually score points when they need to score points. Green Bay, that was a debacle. Dan Quinn was 1 foot out the door, and no one can tell me anything different. I do not believe that he was trying to truly game plan in a fashion that would help the Cowboys win that game. I don't believe Dan Quinn understood what he really wanted to do or how he needed to attack that Green Bay offense, and I think the players were left out to dry in that Green Bay game. And I think just overall, that was a complete clusterbuck. And even the score at the end of the game for the Cowboys, them scoring 32, come on, man. We know most of them points came when the game was well over. So Even if you take a look at this, since Micah Parsons has been here in the 2021 playoffs, the Cowboys lose to the 49ers. Why? Because they only scored 17 points. The defense only gave up 23. In the 2022 playoffs, the Cowboys lose to the 49ers. Why? The defense only gave up 19 points. The offense only scored 12. In the 2023 playoffs, we know what happened. But guess what? The offense couldn't keep pace with Green Bay, and that's also been a reoccurring theme when we see these teams have these huge scoring outbursts. It's been in situations where a team may go down, they may score on the defense, they may get a big play and score on the defense, which happens every now and then. But guess what? The Cowboys offense can't respond because they don't have enough firepower. They don't have an inventive scheme, and they don't have firepower, so they cannot respond. So what happens? You get in situations where your team gets absolutely boat raced, and neither side of the ball is helping each other. The offense can't control the ball to give the defense a break and give them a chance to regroup, and the defense can't stop the opposing offense when their offense can't score the ball. So obviously it's going to create a blowout situation. But in the games that have actually been competitive, the Cowboys have lacked scoring. And it's not just the Cowboys that this trend actually shows itself. And that's why it's important that we don't look at things from just a vacuum of just being a fan of our team. Look across the league, ladies and gentlemen. In the 2023-2024 NFL playoffs, you could see the teams that actually progressed, they had to score points in order to do so. And Kansas City probably had their most defensive unit in their entire run, and they still had to put up 25 in order to actually win that game. And they still had to be able to make a late game drive and be able to utilize different guys on that field to help them make plays. They still had to lean on a run game that would help alleviate some of the pressure off of Patrick Mahomes and slow the game down a little bit for the defense. They still needed an offense that was capable of scoring at any given moment. But even in the lead up to that, the teams that won, they had to score a respectable amount of points on the AFC side and the NFC side. And again, that was probably the most defensive effort the Chiefs have had in their entire run. If you look at the 2022-2023 playoffs, same thing. The end score of the Super Bowl ended up being 38-35. So yes, it's great to try to hold teams down and not keep them from scoring, but guess what? You're going to have to score at some point in the playoffs to win a game. And if the Cowboys don't have weapons to do that, then where does that leave you? And when I say weapons, I don't mean guys that are day 2, day 3 draft picks. I don't mean undrafted free agents that play above their head. I don't mean veterans towards the end of their career. I mean premium blue chip talent. I mean, you can look across the NFL and you can literally see from top to bottom, the Eagles, they have an amazing assortment of weapons. The 49ers, they had an amazing assortment of weapons before all the injuries took toll. The Detroit Lions, they have an amazing assortment of weapons. The Green Bay Packers, they have a really good assortment of weapons, receivers, and good running back. On the AFC side, you can look at the Kansas City Chiefs, say the same thing. The Buffalo Bills, they're really relying on Josh Allen, but they do have a really good running game. The Baltimore Ravens, they have an assortment of weapons now, which makes them the most dangerous version of themselves that they've been in a very long time. And the Ravens are a team that's made their hay off of the defensive side of the ball, but the offensive side coming along is really what pushed the Ravens into a different stratosphere and really making people feel like they can make a serious run this season. Why? Not because the defense is number one, a triple crown defense like it was last season, because now the offense can score at will, and it can score with anyone because it has weapons. And again, you keep going back, the 2021-2022 playoffs, teams had to score points to make it to the Super Bowl. Yes, the Super Bowl was a little bit more low scoring type of affair, but they had to score points to get there. Kansas City put up 42 against Pittsburgh in the first round, 42 against Buffalo in the second round, and they lost to Cincinnati 27-24 in the AFC Championship. Cincinnati had a very, very easy road to the Super Bowl that year outside of that Kansas City game. So there's this kind of like, they were playing against teams they really couldn't score for real. The Las Vegas Raiders, Tennessee Titans. And that's what ends up happening. When your team doesn't have enough weapons to where they can score and hold their own with anybody, teams like the Cincinnati Bengals end up making it to the Super Bowl on your side of the conference because they only had to score 26 in the first round, 19 in the second round, and then 27 in that AFC Championship game. Because yes, their defense held their own against offenses that were very limited in the Las Vegas Raiders and the Tennessee Titans. Do we think that Cincinnati would have been able to do that little run if they had to play against Buffalo, who put up 47 in the first round? Probably not. But that's the thing. Either you get a really lucky draw on your way to the conference championships, or you need to be able to score more than the opposing team. You can go back to the 2020-2021 playoffs. Kansas City would have had to score 32 or more to beat Tampa Bay in the Super Bowl that year. Matter of fact, if you were going to beat Tampa Bay in the playoffs at all that year, you would have had to score more than 30 points. Period. You would have had to beat 30 points. So you need weapons, and the Cowboys have used premium draft picks already. Enough premium draft picks. During Dak Prescott's time here, they have used 7 out of their 9 second-round picks on defensive positions. They drafted Jalen Smith, Chidobe Awuzie, Tristan Hill, Trevon Diggs, Kelvin Joseph, Sam Williams, Marshawn Nealon. Those are all your second-round picks. Don't go defense again in a year where your offense was clearly the weaker unit in 2024 than the defense. The offense was clearly the weaker unit. Anybody saying that they weren't, you're being disingenuous. That was clearly the weaker unit. And I think the defense is closer to being a consistent enough defense where you can consistently hold opponents to around 21, 24 points than offense is to being an offense who can consistently score 30 plus points in the playoffs. If you look at that divisional round matchup against the San Francisco 49ers, you can see that your running backs only gave you 48 yards between the two of them in Tony Pollard and Ezekiel Elliott. You can see that the only receiver that showed up that day was CeeDee Lamb. He had 100 receiving yards. Everyone else had less than 30 receiving yards. You could see in these different matchups against San Francisco in the wild card round, you could see in that game, your running backs only gave you 45 yards rushing between the two of them and Tony Pollard and Ezekiel Elliott. You can see that you didn't have a single 100-yard receiving receiver. In fact, your leading receiver just happened to be Dalton Schultz because San Francisco completely bracketed CeeDee Lamb and they had nowhere else to go. So you didn't have a running game. You didn't have anybody to throw to. It's very, very clear. Yes, Abdul Carter is amazing, but if a Teteroya McMillan falls to you, if you can draft a Micah Parsons, if you can even draft a Luther Burden, if you can draft an Ashton Jeanty, you have to do that because that makes a more immediate and faster impact on this team than drafting an Abdul Carter, who would then join a crowded defensive end room with Sam Williams coming back, with Marshawn Nealon being a second-round pick that was just drafted at that position, with Micah Parsons being in that defensive end room, with a Carl Lawson maybe coming back. There's other guys already in that defensive end room. There's Chauncey Golston. You got different guys already in that defensive end room where Abdul Carter, yes, if he came, he would be coming here, but he would be in a platoon of guys who are capable of running that position right now. We've seen it. The Cowboys have generated the most sacks in the league since Micah Parsons has been back. This team has been rolling on the defensive side of the ball. We have seen it. They are closer to being great on the defensive side of the ball right now than they are to being great on the offensive side of the ball right now. And the easiest way to help your quarterback out, the easiest way to help your head coach out, who's an offensive head coach, is to add blue chip weapons. And I think that's very, very sound thinking as it pertains to how to immediately impact your team in the most positive manner possible. Yes, Abdul Carter is amazing. He's a top 5 type talent. If he fell to 12, it would be very, very hard to pass on him. But I would argue at that point, you could probably get a king's ransom for moving back just a spot or two and letting someone else pick up an Abdul Carter. And guess what? Now you have even more firepower to play with. So I think regardless, if an Abdul Carter is at 12, I think that is a prime opportunity for the Cowboys to trade back and get even more draft capital, only a spot or two, and you would probably still be able to get a premium guy, an Ashton Jeanty, a Micah Parsons, a Luther Burden. Maybe a Teteroya might fall because people may not like how slow he is or whatever it may be. But either way, that's my first thoughts on the NFL draft and what the Cowboys should do with that 12th overall pick. I think they absolutely need to go offense just because it's time. It's time to go offense again. We're in a league where you're going to have to play against a Josh Allen, a Lamar Jackson, a Patrick Mahomes. You're going to have to play against the high-powered Detroit Lions. You're going to have to play against these teams that can score points. And you have to be able to score points too. Even if you're in a defensive battle, you're still going to need to be able to score points to win the game. And that's just the name of the game. And you can't score points when you only have one guy on the offensive side of the ball that puts any fear into the defense's heart, and that's CeeDee Lamb right now. So we need weapons. We need the first round. We need to go offense. I wouldn't be mad at all. I wouldn't be mad if we got an Abdul Carter. I would not be mad if a Mason Graham fell to us and we ended up drafting him. I would not be mad if a Will Johnson fell to us and we ended up drafting him. I would not be mad, but just me personally, I 100% think this is the year we have to go offense. Otherwise, next year around this time, we're going to end up saying we still Them same old Cowboys.
Calling me, texting me, paging me, asking me, am I still them boys? Y'all usually check on me. Listen. I'm still them boys. Hey! Woo! Oh, shut up, my boy. Hey! I'm still them boys.